Raid Lairs were something introduced during Destiny 2's first year. They were essentially an extremely shortened version of a raid and were met with generally poor reception from Destiny fans. Today I thought we'd talk about why Raid Lairs were mostly a flop, but also shed some light on some of the positive things that did come from the Raid Lairs. And if you go on to enjoy this video, drop a like rating down below and subscribe for more Destiny videos just like this one. Now, it'd be an understatement to say that Destiny 2's launch was less than ideal, the numerous flawed gameplay systems and weak endgame being a big reason for that. But even the new raid, the Leviathan raid, wasn't necessarily that popular. After a few runs, most players were pretty much done with the Leviathan and it didn't really have much staying power with the community. So it wasn't long before we were all eager to get our hands on some new raid content. At this point, we knew that two planned DLCs were on the horizon, the first being Osiris themed and the second being Rasputin or a Warmind themed. And players' minds raced with all the possibilities of what an Osiris themed raid or a Rasputin themed raid would look like. So when we got the news that Bungie would be creating much shorter raids set inside the same location as the main raid, players were a bit bummed. Not only were the raids going to be shorter, but because they were still set inside the Leviathan, the theme of all the raids wouldn't be aligned with the new DLCs. This killed a lot of the hype for a new raid for me and many other players because they had a lot of potential to make a raid, even if it was a shorter one, that was themed with each DLC. So that brings me to the first point I want to discuss, the failed thematic element. I really want to hammer this point down because I think it ends up being a very key point when it comes to how poorly the Raid Lairs were received. Instead of creating raid experiences in line with the DLCs, Bungie instead opted to continue the Leviathan Callus theme and story, which proved to be a very poor choice. Players were not at all too keen on the idea of going back into the Leviathan, even if it was a new section of that area. Players wanted a raid that was Osiris themed, or for Warmind, Warmind themed. The number of missed opportunities for truly interesting raids in theme with the expansions are immense, so let's talk about Curse of Osiris' potential first. Now, while the story was pretty lacking, the idea and concept behind Curse of Osiris is honestly very cool. Curse of Osiris dealt with Osiris, a character who was a fan favorite from inside the lore, and traveling through time inside the Infinite Forest with the Vex. It's all a really good concept, and the potential for a raid within that theme is crazy. I mean, imagine if Bungie had stuck with the Infinite Forest concept and used that as a playground for the raid. They could have even had us fighting Panoptes as the final boss inside the raid and used the same mechanics and boss design they used for Argos because they're actually very similar when it comes to their character model. But the DLC with the most missed potential was Warmind. In the Warmind campaign, you deal with Zol, a worm god, Nokris, a cast-out son of Oryx, and Rasputin, a Warmind legend responsible for so much of the game's overarching plot. Yet none of these incredible characters were used inside the raid. Instead, we got another uninteresting giant space rhino. I remember when it was revealed that Nokris and Zol were going to be mission and strike bosses. This was a massive turnoff for me because not only is Zol one of the most powerful characters in the lore, but Nokris was an extremely elusive, interesting character that had ties to Oryx, and most people thought maybe Nokris was Oryx's lover, or maybe the one who was truly pulling all the strings. Just imagine if the raid had us fighting both Nokris and Zol instead of this guy. Players wouldn't have felt disrespected or cheated by minimizing such badass characters to simply story and strike missions. Now, beyond the failed theme of these raids, what else didn't work about these Raid Lairs? Let's first talk about Eater of Worlds. Eater of Worlds is the shortest raid ever, shorter than Crota, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's even shorter than most of the strikes in Destiny 2. That's not to say that it doesn't have anything great about it though, but let's start from the very beginning. The first encounter is basically hopscotch with your team, which has to be one of the most boring openings to a raid ever. After a few minutes of that, you come to a platform where you just kill waves of ads. That's it. And congratulations, you're done. You made it all the way to the final boss. You can see why people barely even consider this to be a raid at all. Before you can even blink, you're at the final boss. But here's where I'll say something good about the raid. When you step into this cannon that launches you to Argos, the skybox and design of this whole arena is really cool, and the final boss room is very well made and unique. The Argos Phase 1 and 2 fights are also pretty good, and it was pointed out to me in one of my YouTube comments that overall Argos is a bit underrated, and I'd have to agree. But the loot for this fight was not even worth it, which didn't help out the popularity of Eater of Worlds. Argos isn't the best boss in Destiny 2, but he's still an enjoyable one, and it's a shame that his boss fight is tied to such an overall mediocre raid experience. But now let's talk about Spire of Stars. Easily the most unpopular raid experience in Destiny history, which, if we take a look at the completions in comparison to Leviathan and Eater of Worlds, we can see that by far Spire of Stars was the least popular. This could be due to a number of things. It could be due to its difficulty and also a decreased player base, but whichever reason, it just was not popular. I liked Spire of Stars though, more than Eater of Worlds, but I hardly ever go back and replay because Val Ca'uor is mechanically so demanding. Its difficulty is right up there with Axis Challenge Mode and the Riven fight, but unlike Axis or Riven, Val Ca'uor is just not fun. Spire of Stars does begin with an actual encounter, unlike Eater of Worlds, that was a pretty enjoyable entrance to the raid. It was actually a bit difficult to do, but it was also pretty fun. Any mechanic that has you playing catch with your raid team is a good one by my standards. The jumping puzzle required your team to juggle the ball while navigating through its many difficult platforming moments, which was also a ton of fun. But now it was time to fight Val Ca'uor, which I mentioned earlier was very demanding. This is still the boss that took the most time for my team and I to beat in Destiny 2. Even Riven didn't take us this long. There are so many steps before finally being able to DPS Val Ca'uor that the fight ends up being pretty tedious. But I do like this encounter. It is for the most part really well designed, but it's exhausting to run, and the loot again is extremely lacking, which is why I don't have many completions. After Spire of Stars, Bungie retired the concept of Raid Lairs, and after Forsaken's Last Wish, Bungie made raids that were a bit shorter, yes, but were set in entirely new areas. Oh wait, what? Crown of Sorrows was inside the Leviathan? No! Well, almost entirely new, but at least both Scourge of the Past and Crown of Sorrows felt more complete and had more to them than Eater of Worlds and Spire of Stars. In summary, I believe the Raid Lairs failed for these three reasons. Number 1, the theme didn't fit the narrative. Number 2, it was a branch off from a previous raid's theme. Number 3, their length and their encounters prior to the final boss were very lacking. I like the idea of a large raid release with every expansion and shorter raids like Scourge of the Past released throughout the year in between. But this year we haven't received a new raid at all from the Season Pass content, which is a bit disappointing, and likely won't see a new raid until September 2020 with whatever expansion Bungie releases at that time. But I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Be sure to leave a like and comment your thoughts down below. Subscribe for more Destiny content, and I will see you guys later.